Okay, welcome everybody. Today is January 26th, and you are here today with the Open Education Resources Special Interest Group for a continuing ed event with Kate Fox and Barb Kaminski, who are joining us today for Solving Today's Ethical Dilemmas, a values-focused approach. This is part 2, but it is okay if you were not here for part 1 in December. This is a 50-minute One Ethics continuing ed event. And we are delighted to have you here today. The Opening Education Resources SIG is a special interest group of ABAI. We have a mission to promote the adoption, creation, and dissemination of open educational resources in behavior analysis. It is free to join us. Visit our website at openbehaviorsig.org. Very easy to join. There's a join button there. Click. There's absolutely no cost. You'll hear about what's going on with a special interest group, free events like this one where you can earn free continuing education, as well as other opportunities to join in with like-minded individuals for events and resources that might be available and of interest to you for our discipline. We are offering continuing ed today through Mary Baldwin University. So if you'd like to receive continuing education credit, the way that you can do that is by signing in by typing your first and last name in the chat box, either to everyone or to me as a direct message. And then we'll ask you to do that again at the end of the session today. We'll also give you an evaluation link at the end of the session. We'll ask that you do that. So if you do those 3 things, you will receive a certificate within about 7 days or so. In your inbox. If there's any questions or errors, let me know and I'll be happy to remedy that for you. So let me go ahead and introduce today's speakers. We have Kate Fox joining us today. She has worked in the field of applied behavior analysis since 2011, completed her Master of Science degree from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, became a BCBA in 2015. Her main areas of interest are ACT supervision and relational frame theory and ethics, of course. That's why she's here joining us tonight. With her, she is joined by Dr. Kaminski, who is currently the clinical director of Green Box ABA and an instructor with the ABA program at George Mason University. Barb is the co-founder of Uncomfortable X, which was a behavior analysis forum for conversation and learning surrounding those uncomfortable situations, much like a lot of these ethical situations we'll be talking about today. Its history and ongoing pains. Barb is a BCBA-D licensed behavior analyst in Virginia and has her PhD from West Virginia University, postdoc and faculty experience at Johns Hopkins University. So we're glad to have these folks joining us today. But before I turn it over to them, I want to let you know, please, there's going to be lots of participation today, so use that chat box, and there may even be an opportunity for you to turn on your microphone and chat and engage in that way as well. So utilize the chat box. This is going to be a high engagement session, and I'm going to turn off my microphone and pass it over to Kate and Barb. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Potter, and we are so excited to be here again and to work through some additional ethical dilemmas with you. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to, I'm going to first lay out a little bit of our general approach to solving ethical scenarios and ethical dilemmas. And then we're going to run through a values exercise, because as you'll see, we take a values-based approach to solving these kinds of situations. And then we're going to spend most of our time on looking at some scenarios and how to work through them and how to problem solve through them. And we are definitely going to be looking for your input. We want you to feel free to type in the, not feel free, encourage, no, we're going to be, it is a necessary part of this discussion. So we, please type in the chat when the time comes. So how we're going to approach this, and what our approach is to solving ethical situations, is that you, as a behavior analyst, as an ethical behavior analyst, are informed by 2 different things. One, of course, is the BACB Ethics Code, which is the enforceable part of our ethics. And it is a very important one, and it's the one that we all receive instruction on. But you as an ethical behavior analyst also bring into every situation personal ethics and values. And we really believe that ethics does not equal the BACB code. It equals what we bring into the situation as well, what all those our personal ethics are bringing into the situation. For a variety of reasons, however, we are focused as behavior analysts on the BACB's code, and we generally look to it to provide the solutions and guidance when we are faced with dilemmas. What we're going to spend a little bit of time at the beginning and then during our problem solving is, how can you tell the difference between what is a code violation and what is a personal value that you are bringing into the situation? And how do you respond to the scenarios that you are presented with, the dilemmas that you're presented with within both frameworks? And we very strongly believe that the power of ethical problem solving should be how we also bring our values into the situation. So before we get into actually looking at some scenarios, if we're going to do that in a value-focused way, we have to spend a little bit of time talking about what our values are and looking and exploring what they are. So I'm going to toss it over to Kate to talk with you about your values and to work through a values exercise with you.
So we're going to take some time to define our own values. And I've pulled from multiple areas of your life, of our lives, because I think that it's really important to kind of not always distinguish between your professional values and your other and the values that you hold the rest of the time, because you're a human being and those values go with you whether you're at work or not. So they're going to inform your decisions. They're going to inform decisions in other areas of your life, or they're going to be present with you. So let's take some time to go through some of these values clarifying questions together. Okay. Yes, access. I love that. That's a great, yes, absolutely. And I think that I think we share that value because we're here with OER. Absolutely. Yeah, if there's anything else anyone else wants to share, feel free. We'll take another minute thinking about work and education. Okay. All right. Long-term gains for your client. That's awesome. All right. So, all right. Let's move to relationships, because I really do want to take time. We really want to be holistic about like where our values come from. So what relationships are important to you in and out of work? How do you want to treat others in your relationships? What qualities do you want to work on? Or who do you want to be with other people, whether you're at work or not? Compassionate. Flexible. Inclusive. Trustworthy and fair. Great. So empathetic, reliable, helpful. Yeah. And do we want to be these things at work? I mean, do we only want to be these things at work or outside of work? Probably not, maybe some of them, but not all. Like there's overlap. I want to surround myself with people who care deeply. I love that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you for all these responses. So personal growth and health. I think this is one that I think we think about that absolutely overlaps with our professional lives when we think about burnout. So how do you take care of yourself? What's meaningful to you as a person? Like where do you get meaning? And I know some people get that I know you can get a lot of meaning out of your work. But how else do you do that? With boundaries, yes. Walking your dog, yes. Self-care. Going outside, I need to do that more. Excellent, yes. You can go shopping, Elizabeth. Yes, I love how boundaries are coming in here and other people do. Yes, encouraging others to exercise self-care because you have to walk the walk. Workouts, great. Yes. So all of these things are related to each other. And then let's just take a minute. Ooh, marathons. Okay, let's just take a minute to look at leisure, and there is some overlap here too. How do you relax? What are your hobbies? And then we have another thing that we're going to do with this. So animal training, only data. I knew we were going to get one of those this time. Only data. I only write reports. That's what I do. Knitting, reading, animal training. I love animal training. More shopping, making comics. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So we have things that we like to do outside of work, except for a couple people, which is usually what we get. Cool. So let's go to the next slide. Keep these answers with you. And let's go to the next slide. So I want you to look at this bullseye graphic and think about, you can draw one if you want at home. Think about in each of these sections of the bullseye where how close you are to the middle. If you are close to the middle, or you're in the middle, you are meeting all of your expectations you're living by the values and priorities that you have in this area of your life. And the further away you would rate yourself from the center is you're less consistent. So think about where you would rate each of these areas based on what's important to you and what your overt behavior is in your life. So once you've done that, my first question is, what are you doing right? Like where are you rating yourself close to the center? And what behaviors are you doing that what are you doing that's letting you rate yourself that way? All right, yes, you're here. You're showing up for work and education. You're showing up to work, maybe. Yeah, okay. So we might not, right, we're not always in the middle and everything. And we might need to practice some acceptance there. That might be, and you know what, like killing it on personal stuff is great too. I mean, I know we're in a professional development meeting, but we all have personal lives, personal growth. Cutting out folks who didn't respect boundaries moves you closer to the center with relationships. Yes. Having routines can help you be close on personal growth. Awesome. Yes, sometimes when you're closer to the middle, oh yes, you can make extra circles if you need to. But yeah, that's a really good point, and I think that's part of why we picked the bullseye tonight. Lou, is that you can't be, yeah, it's very hard to be in the middle for everything, and sometimes like if something is kind of sometimes if a value is sticking out to us or something is important to us, it might yeah, we might it might change our motivation to interact with situations at work differently. All right, this is awesome. Yeah, and nobody is going to be in the center all the time, so okay. Yes, I love this. So specifically making time for healthcare visits is great. You guys are awesome. Does anybody want to talk about some behaviors that you could do that would move you closer to the center for your less consistent quadrants? Everyone's so supportive in the chat. I love it. Focus on one thing at a time. Yes, boundary. We've got a lot of boundaries talk tonight. Stop doing grad school. Cool. Yeah. So being accountability partners for leisure and health, that's a great one. These are all, yeah, so these are all like overt observable behaviors. Data, yeah, I mean, you can collect data on this too. That's absolutely, and we're behavior analysts, so I would encourage you, if you see if you're seeing somewhere that you want to move closer to the center, that's a great idea. Schedule specific times for one thing in each further out area. Yeah, scheduling opportunities, that's great. I love this. I'll go one more minute with this and then we'll move to our go to our scenarios. Okay. Yeah, so Christine tends to be on 24/7, and saying no to things is part of can be part of moving closer to the middle on some things. That's awesome. And I'm hearing again, like a lot of people talking about boundaries tonight. And I think like when we work in helping professions, it can be really hard for us to say no. And I love how a lot of this is people saying no, and learning how to say no so that you can say yes to other things. Okay, cool. So we're going to wrap this up. So we'll go to the next slide and just lead into our scenarios. Okay, so we're going to look at some scenarios. Some were sent to us, some we found on social media, and changed some of the identifying information. So these are all, they're kind of composites. But when we talk about, we did a values activity first because we want you to be thinking about what's important to you you look at uncomfortable situations so that you have more tools and more awareness of more ability to kind of evaluate like what part of this bothers you, because we know that it's very easy for people to say, this is unethical, right? Or this feels unethical, or something about this is wrong. It must be unethical. It might not be. It might just be a conflict with your values or something that just we don't want to be involved with. And that's okay too. So the purpose of this is to practice identifying, is something a code violation? And if it's not, like, what's wrong with it? And how can we respond? Even if there's something that isn't a code violation, but we don't like it. That's our whole idea here. So I guess we can move to some scenarios.
Yep. And so as Kate mentioned, we did find these scenarios and I solicited some from friends also on social media. But one of the key things that we found in all the scenarios that are selected is that there were people who in these public forums, as they responded and provided advice to the person who had posted the scenario, were consistently finding ways for the code to apply to these scenarios. And so that's one of the things that I really want us to evaluate as we look through these, because that's the whole point, right? That sometimes there are things that can be uncomfortable for us, but there are not code violations. And yet that's kind of what we're seeing out there, that the way people are giving advice. I will say that for some of these, I also saw some folks come at it and, with the like, whoa, I'm gonna need you to slow down. Let's talk about whether that's a code violation, which warmed my heart to see some of that in the discussions on some of these. But also there are a lot of people coming in and looking at these strictly from a code perspective. And the other thing, again, as Kate had mentioned about that bullseye, to kind of think of that in terms of like, is the way this is triggering me, moving me away from the center of the bullseye, right? And is my response to it trying to pull me closer back into that center, because we're trying to respond to how this is affecting our values. So you ready, Kate? As we go in, we want you to talk about these. We don't want to do most of the talking, right? So, I mean, we're going to do some talking, but we want you to be, as you have been, responding to the scenarios, telling us what you think in the chat, and so that we can have some good discussion about it. All right, here we go. Here's the first one.
Okay, I work with very young learners who have long sessions and still take naps. My company does not bill while they take naps and resume services after they wake up. Is it ethical for them to be there while they're napping? What do you think? Oh, okay, bill. So by bill, we mean we are not billing. Well, not we, this isn't our company, but that the company is not billing the insurance, the payer while they're napping. We're assuming that they're paying the employee and they're in a center, not at home. I think for this one, yeah. Okay, is it a developmental preschool? No, it is not a developmental preschool. It is an ABA clinic. Center-based ABA clinic. Ooh, Robin, I like that. So if the parents are around, you could do some parent training. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But yes, everyone's being paid, and no money is being collected while the child is asleep. What is the employee doing during naps? What do you think, Barb?
What is the employee doing? Good question.
That is a very good question.
Kind of hanging out and make sure that the kid is staying
Does it-
safe during that time.
Okay, so yes, so Dana, the child has adequate supervision because the employee is making sure that they're safe. Okay. Yes, situationally specific, but is this a code violation? I guess is the question, the first question. We don't love it yet. Right. See, okay, so Lou, so here's what this is our point, right? Like, we don't love this, but it's not necessary, but like, there's no fraud. There's no, there's nothing, no one, like, everyone's being paid. It's not optimal, but it's probably not a code violation in this form.
So first of all, we like to start out with a softball.
We moved some around.
Yeah, we did. But before we move on from this one, I just want to throw out there, did anybody want to take a guess what people were saying online about how this is a code violation? Like, where were they, what were they identifying as a potential code violation, do you think? Any guess? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah,
dual
Crystal.
relationship,
Yeah.
you got it. Yeah, so yeah, the billing isn't, the billing wasn't part of it, but dual relationship was the question. Exactly. So this was, is it babysitting? So our thoughts on this, and like our thoughts on this were, it is like, yeah, like maybe babysitting. But would you bring your kid to the clinic to sleep? Like, if you flip the relationship, if you flip that around, like, is that going to like, would that happen? Or are they there to access services, and because they're 2 or 3, or they're still taking naps, and they need naps to, like, because of their age. We're not running a napping center, we're running an ABA clinic, but in order for someone to access services, they sleep for, like, they sleep in the middle of the day for a little bit. Like, we're not really sure that it's a code violation.
Yeah. Yeah. And Crystal pointed out that, like, if they get sent home and they come back,
Yeah.
by the way, if you're going to send them
Yes.
home, they're going to get woken up in order to do that. So
Yes.
you could
And that's another good point, Dr. Bartold. Like, does the company want too many hours? So I think, can their day be split? Yeah, so these are all individual questions that I think it's really important to consider with this one. Is there a way that, like, is this really, like, is this in every client's best interest? Are there some clients where this is the best arrangement? Are there some times where maybe this isn't necessary? Like, is this like a blanket thing that's going on? And it depends on the company, like, but yeah, like, it's probably something that, well, yeah, and if it's childcare, then that would be a whole other situation, right? So, right. So thinking about it individually, and determining if there's other ways around it, is in everyone's best interest. But that doesn't necessarily involve the code of ethics.
All right. The next, I just want to point out that I have 2 scenarios thrown in here that were provided to me by Christy Evenko. Evenko and Matthews are going to be presenting here next month, so I hope that you will join for that. And they've been engaging in some research to look at the use of decision tree problem solving models to teach ethics, and whether or not how that affects how people respond to ethical scenarios. And so there are two that they provided to us that they used in their research. And this is one of them. So you are a BCBA or a BCABA who provides direct services in a home setting. Your client, Frederick, is often aggressive and destructive in the home, to the home. When you make your supervision visit this week, you notice that there are new holes in the walls, but you also see several empty bottles of alcohol on the counter in the kitchen. When talking to your client's father after the session, he seems fine, but you think that you might smell alcohol in his breath. He is planning to drive your client to a doctor's appointment after the session. What should you do? All right. I wasn't watching the chat while I talked.
All
What do
right,
we
so
got?
we've got mandatory this may fall under mandatory reporting. We've got yipes on bikes. So we're right now we're thinking this is we're talking about mandatory reporting versus no ethics comments so far.
Right. So the question, so part of the question is would you be engaging in something unethical if you were to not take action?
And if he's intoxicated and it seems if you suspect he's intoxicated, it seems like you have to do or say something. Otherwise, you are liable and need to prevent harm. Okay, so preventing harm. Personal ethics about the kid's safety. If the supervisor does not act, that would be a violation. Code. Okay, so Veronica is saying code, not a code violation, but it might be a mandatory reporter situation. So we have a lot of discussion about it potentially is a mandatory reporting situation, potentially a do no harm from ethics code, but not as strong response on that one as mandatory reporting. So then the question is, if you suspect something, like, yes, how do you casually ask, so are you going to be driving? That's the question. So what do we think? We need more information to determine if he's intoxicated. Yeah. Yep. So we may not have enough information here. More information on the property destruction. We need to be able to administer our own field sobriety tests. Okay. Yeah, like you could seek more information from dad. Yeah, so this one is let me pull up the actual code. This one's tricky. Yeah. Yes. So I mean, I think Barb and I talked about this one too. We're thinking you would need more information than what you have.
True. And I can tell you what, if you want to know how Ivanko and Matthews responded to this scenario, you could attend their webinar next month. Because they do have a way that they developed an answer to it, which then they were looking to see whether the students that they were teaching matched their answers. And I believe, because I talked with Christy about this a couple of weeks ago, and I believe that their response was that there were a lot of potential assumptions, and that more information was necessary. So,
yeah. But yes. So another example of, something feeling wrong, or something being off, or something being uncomfortable, and maybe not maybe not necessarily that, like, there are other things that we may want to use to make decisions in addition to the code. All right. What's next?
Oh, did I skip one? I think I just went too fast.
Maybe.
Yes.
No.
No, I didn't. Oh, there we go. Sorry about that. Okay.
Okay. You are a BCBA at ABC Behavior Clinics. The managing director, a BCBA, is very good to you and just had a company-wide party where they distributed hats and t-shirts to all the BCBAs that say awesome BCBA on the front and the company name on the back. Surely that's not a problem, right? What do you think? Do we have a code violation? Okay, yes. If you are a BCBA-D, then it is not accurate.
Yeah. This is very current, Crystal. There's been a lot going
I
around about
love
this.
the chats
right?
on these.
Oh.
They're so great. Okay. All right. So what do you think? Is there a code violation? It's a trademark. Yes. Okay. Yes. So this one is a code violation. It looks very benign. But this is an actual code violation. And you know what? You might not be awesome. You might be neat or cool or groovy. So yeah,
But,
maybe don't go getting a tattoo of BCBA.
BCBA, yeah.
Or at least like make sure you can cover it up if something happens. Like maybe don't get a neck tattoo. All right, so this one's pretty
Right.
clear cut.
But interestingly, I do want to say about this one that it would be the potential to kind of let our values take it the other direction, right? So rather than look at this and say, oh yes, this is a code violation, our values about like, you know, related to our work environment and representing the field and all of that might lead us to come at this particular situation with well, but that's not a big deal. That's not important, right? So while we've been kind of focusing on the problem of not recognizing how your values are affecting the scenarios in a way that leads you to call something a code violation, it's also possible to kind of flip that and not call something a code violation because of some way that you're responding related to your values. And this is one that would be, you could very, very easily see how that would happen.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
All right, ready for the next one?
Let's go.
Okay, we're gonna do one more and then Dr. Potter and Dr. Howard have one that I want to hear. They're
We haven't heard it.
Yeah, we haven't heard it. So it's going to be like one that we're going to be just doing without any prep. Okay, here's the next one.
Okay, I feel uncomfortable with decisions made by my current employer that I think violate the code. Unfortunately, I signed a supervision contract that included a clause where I either stay with the company for 2 years after passing the exam, or I pay them for training costs that total tens of thousands of dollars. What can I do? So, question one, is there a code violation? Or in what situations could this be a code violation? Because it might not always be one. Yeah, I know, negative reinforcement much. So so here's a question. So as a trainee, they need to report, no. Well, do they need to report? I guess the question here that we're kind of like, who are they reporting? Stay and do the worst job possible. Steal office supplies.
So many Post-it notes. So many Post-it notes.
I know. Yeah, so Sora's not convinced that the contracts are ethical. Yeah. What do we think? Are there specific situations where it's more likely that this is a code violation, that the contract is a code violation. Yeah, because it does seem more legal than ethical. And that's kind of where we were. So we were thinking of, right. We were thinking of like where would this be a code violation? Because there could absolutely be some legal things going on. Are there specifics that could also bring the code in, or is this legal / like, why would I want to work for a company that forces me to stay there? Because that's a whole values thing.
I mean, what if your current employer was a BCBA?
Yep.
Just you and another BCBA. Does that change it?
Yeah, so you could be forcing someone to work in a problem environment. It is awkward. Yeah, I mean, we don't like this. I mean, we don't charge people here because for this reason, like we want people to do a good job. And if they don't want to work here, then don't work here. Yeah, we
I don't want to conscript you to work for me.
Right. So Barb was just saying that it gets more tricky ethically if the owner is if the person you sign the contract with is a BCBA. And that might bring some things, that might bring in some ethics, some code issues. If it's an organization, that's tougher on that one. We'll be making RBTs into NFTs and trying to trade them. Yeah, probably someone's gonna do that. Okay. So yeah, so this one has a lot of things going on that are really uncomfortable. There may be some ABA coin. There may be some like governing bodies that could be involved with this. It may or may not be the code of ethics depending on who's involved.
Yeah. And I want to remind everybody as we talk through these that every single one of the scenarios that we've presented, right, on somewhere on social media, there have been people who their response to what should we do about this or what should I do about this has been contact the board, report to the board. If this is a violation of blank code or blank code, everyone, well, I can't speak to the Evenko and Matthews ones, but the other ones that we have pulled, every single one of those, were people who responded that way. So it wasn't that we like picked ones that, yeah, we picked them specifically for that reason, right? So to make the point that there are people who are responding to these scenarios in that way. So, all right, we want to hear what Doctors Potter and Howard have to say.
All right, this is, if you can get your head in sort of a frame of mind of the Sixth Sense and I see dead people. And this is just something that crossed my mind the other day. There are many organizations, we happen to we do live CE events and we make our recordings available for people after the fact. We do not offer CE credit for people who view them offline, and that simply just has to do with management of the process. But there are organizations, particularly people who are able to manage them because they charge for that process, who offer asynchronous CEs. I have taken advantage of many of those and am appreciative that there are organizations that offer asynchronous CEs. But it has occurred to me that, if somebody were to offer an asynchronous continuing ed event, they record it and it gets published and offered by an organization, and it is an amazing CE event, and they record it while they are a credentialed behavior analyst, and then they die. At what point are they no longer able to offer that continuing ed event? Because either their credentials have literally expired due to the expiration of the credential, or because, and I'm not trying to make light of people literally expiring, but either because they have expired or their credentials have expired. Or could one perhaps get around that by utilizing that great information? Take Jack Michael as an example. Let's say there's an excellent recording of an event that's been done, but it could be used within an event that somebody else who is currently credentialed could facilitate around that, to provide context to that. But I happen to have seen, coming across my feed on social media recently, a continuing ed event that happens to be by somebody who is deceased. And it just made me think, I'm sure it's a fantastically wonderful continuing ed event, but it just made me think of the question. And Dr. Howard and I were thinking about it and said, oh, let's save it for Thursday to see what do we think about that? And, is the right answer to place that within the context of facilitation, to be able to use that information that might still be good, but facilitated by somebody who has in fact not literally expired.
Chris has a very excellent point in the chat, which is like a clarifying question. So who's offering the CE? Like, who is the event coordinator? Who's responsible for the content of the CE?
And that's a good point. That is obviously not the individual who is deceased. It's a host organization, right?
Well, I hope so, because they only have 45 days. So we need like a necromancer or something.
Right. Well, so Brad actually just typed in the chat my first thought on it, which was that not necessarily a code violation. Well, I think there might actually be something in the code about this, but it would, like, where is the IP there, right? The intellectual property, right? What gives whoever is presenting it the right to present someone else's stuff?
Because I think we have an obligation to make sure through continuing ed, we are presenting either current stuff or historical stuff for a reason to provide current context. And I think about Dr. Barthold's a great example, who presented historical context information in a CE that she did for us through the SIG not that long ago. That was historical in nature, but through a lens of current applicability. And so I think there is a sense of expiration for some continuing ed. It was just an interesting thing that I thought about as it crossed, and it was just sort of a fleeting comment, not at all a criticism of the ACE provider at all, and a highly valuable continuing ed event. I have no doubt at all, and not questioning that at all, just a question.
Well, and I love the way that you frame the question about, like, what do we have permission about? What are the topics of content that we're using? And as Brad is mentioning in chat, it's the intellectual property of, like, if the entire event is a pre-recorded presentation offered by a deceased behavior analyst, or if the content at the time that it was originally recorded was an approved CE event, could it continue to be used? Do we start treading into other kinds of copyright consideration territory? Like, are we thinking about fair use and the 4 elements of fair use determination? Are we presenting like Chris did in that amazing presentation available online? If you're one of our members, check out the discussion forum, because you can check out Chris's presentation about the history of behavior analysis and issues that arose, you know, at times. But the way Chris presented that information was in a way to present the information and then to comment on it, to like add additional contextual information, to synthesize that information in respect to cultural contingencies of the time. Like, is it provided for commentary and the recorded material is not the entirety, the substantiality of the presentation? Or are we just repeating an entire 50-minute presentation and offering CEs for it until the end of time?
Yeah.
Speaking of CEs, please, just a reminder, I'll interject here. If you are wanting continuing ed credit for this event, please remember there are 2 more things that you need to do. You need to both sign out your first and last name and complete the evaluation at the link provided. Both of those tasks need to be completed if you would like continuing ed credit. So 2 more tasks you need to do. Stay on for the discussion. This is not a dismissal unless you need to leave. But do remember first and last name and the evaluation. I'll copy the evaluation link a few more times periodically for you, but the evaluation link and signing out if you would like CE credit, but please continue to stay as long as you'd like for the discussion.
All right, so I'm going to wrap up with just a couple of recommendations. And then we had so many scenarios we didn't get through, which is awesome. We over prepared, love it. But here, and then we'll open up and continue for any continued discussion that you might want to have. Our recommendations are that there be specific instruction on distinguishing code violation from personal values and ethics triggers. That does not exclusively focus on teaching the code. We do so much of that in our ethics instruction. There are so many reasons for it, and you'll just have to read the paper that Kate and I are writing to find out what they are. But you know, there's teaching the use of decision trees and problem-solving techniques is really essential, and incorporating, right, specific instruction about how to include and incorporate your values into that decision making are going to be a key part of that. And second recommendation is that we need appropriate and knowledgeable resources for practitioners that can replace seeking information on social media platforms. My experience here with the social media platforms is that, you know how this is. Anybody can say anything. And everybody is equally knowledgeable, apparently, on social media, right? Everybody's opinion has the same weight. And so it's hard for someone, if you are a young practitioner and you've got all these, Facebook friends or Reddit friends or whoever you're posting things, right? To curate and evaluate the statements and comments and advice that's being provided to you. There are resources out in the field already. There's an ABA ethics hotline. Unfortunately, I don't think that the folks at that ethics hotline are bringing that values piece into it. But if it's clearly something that's a code violation, they can give you some good advice about that. But there need to be some other ways for practitioners who are encountering these kinds of situations to get knowledgeable feedback. And there are also, I just want to say, there are also a lot of the individual like state organizations and APBA and sources like that do have ethics Q&A kind of stuff that are available, and that is also a good resource. But obviously people aren't taking very good advantage of those, and they're going to these other sources, and we could behavior analyze those reasons all for a while, but they're easy, right? And they get a lot of response. So I'm sure it's very reinforcing to take your questions to social media. All right, well, that's all we have prepared, and it is 8 o'clock, but we would love to continue to talk with you for as long as Drs. Potter and Howard are willing to keep the room open. And so if anybody has anything else they want to talk about, you can type in the chat, you can come off mute. I think otherwise we're wrapping it up. Anybody have anything else, feel free.
Well, I will thank you all very much for coming back. I think back-to-back presenters. I think that's the first time we've had folks come back to back, and you have an extended invitation anytime you would like to.
We have so many scenarios, y'all.
We only went through half of those, man.
You need a
It's like-
series. You just need the Kate and Barb show. But thank you, truly. I am going to go ahead and stop recording. I will remember to do that, even though I did not remember to start recording in a timely fashion. But we can certainly continue to stay on as long as folks would like to continue to have conversation.